Well, good morning, everybody. It is 11:30, and wanted to get started this morning. Excited that you've decided to join us. My name is Lisa Schaefer, and welcome to Mental Health Awareness Week. This week, of course, is the time that we dedicate to helping educate people about the importance of reducing mental health stigma and really increase the opportunity for us to really reflect on our own mental well-being and what we're doing to continue to stay engaged and stay, of course, involved in our lifestyles. So I'm excited that you guys have taken time to join me. Again, I'm an instructor for mental health first aid, which is a national curriculum that, of course, focuses on how we can assist and how we can help people through times of crisis, but as well through times of just daily living. I'm also a school counselor and a former psychology instructor at Southwest Tech. So glad to have you guys on with me today. I do want to let you know, logistically wise, we do have the chat box that is available for you. So please feel free to utilize the chat at any time. That chat box is an opportunity for you to, again, basically show some love to each other, or again, share some advice, or what you're doing to live 100 these days, or if you're on fire, what are you doing to be on fire? So please feel free to utilize that. Also, if you're feeling brave today, on video, put your video cameras on, because I'm gonna tell you right now, this is a judgment-free zone. So not to worry about anything. It's a matter of connecting and saying hi. So if you're feeling brave and you want to engage, please feel free to do that as well. But we're excited that you're here. And again, just a quick check-in. My friends, how many of you woke up today and you were feeling like, woo, it's Thursday. I'm excited to be here. I am excited to be able to take part in a class that's going to help me with my mental health. How many are like, yeah, that's me? Give me a thumbs up. I'm feeling it today. Woohoo, I love the energy. How many are like, you know what, Lisa? I'm kind of excited to be here, but I'm just not certain yet because, mental health is kind of, it's a touchy topic. And sometimes it's kind of taboo to talk about it. If you're feeling like, okay, just give me a quick woo. And some of you are like, you know what, Lisa, I woke up today and I would have preferred to have been outside because the sun is shining and I don't want to sit in a session for an hour. If you're feeling that way, just give me a thumbs down. Again, it's just a quick opportunity for you guys to check in. I'm hoping you're feeling thumbs up today and really giving yourselves a chance to get inspired and get engaged about a topic that's really passionate to me. Mental health awareness. What do we need to do to help support ourselves? And what do we need to do to help support each other? So today's session, I want to let you know, is being recorded. So again, this will be shared through Southwest Tech, just to keep that information available to you. But I have a lot of great resources. One of the big resources I'm going to encourage you to think about is NAMI. How many of you guys have heard of NAMI? And I'm just going to open it up to people. If you've heard of it, give me a quick thumbs up. If you want to give a quick testimonial of NAMI, feel free to unmute your mic and say anything that you know about NAMI right now. Again, NAMI is a great resource. It's the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And again, this is the week that they dedicate to trying to reduce stigma. So I will be utilizing a lot of the information through NAMI, as well as the information in the mental health first aid course. So again, as always, we're glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share for us, just to kind of give us a quick look as to what do we need to do. And as always, check in. How are you doing? One of the biggest things in education, in the workplace, is trying to, again, give people just this idea of what's working, where are we at? And how many of you are like, oh, here's my current story. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm feeling a little bit of stress. I'm not exactly sure how things are moving. But again, where are you? And are you dreaming about moving away to an island to get away from it all? Sometimes people tell me, yeah, Lisa, I would really love to just get away from it all. But I want us to think about, where are we at in our own journey? How many of us during COVID are feeling this focus on fear? Or are we focusing on faith that, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to be able to move forward, and we're going to be able to engage. And how many are thinking to yourself, you know what? I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now. And one of the biggest things I encourage for mental health is really giving yourself some grace. We have, of course, gone through what we call a traumatic cycle. That traumatic cycle has gone through kind of a whole phase, which we call COVID. Now, a lot of times people are like, Lisa, I'm sick of talking about COVID. I do want to acknowledge the fact that this is a trauma for many people because it is something that is causing a lot of uncertainty. A trauma is defined as something that disrupts or changes routine that is unexpected and uncertain. That is any type of trauma. So again, just being aware that that trauma is something that's happening. Back in March, when this first started happening, we went through a kind of a warning phase and a threat phase where it was kind of just this pre-disaster. We weren't sure what was going on. Then there was impact that hit. When that impact hit, that's when people started to say, wow, okay, hold on, what's happening? Where are we? What's going on? And then we jumped into what we call heroic stage. And this heroic stage is where we're like, you know what? I'm going to try all these new things. I'm going to learn all this stuff. And we got into this honeymoon phase where the community kind of came together. And then we were like putting hearts on our windows and doing all those different types of things. And then all of a sudden we've hit disillusionment. And right now what we're seeing is we're seeing a high rate of anxiety. We're seeing a high rate of depression. Suicide numbers are going up, because we're going into this stage of disillusionment, which basically says, you know, I've been doing this now for 6 months, 7 months. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. These changes have really caused us so much uncertainty. Is this ever going to end? And we're starting to lose what we call that hope piece. So today, hopefully we can look at what it is, how can we help ourselves get into what's called reconstruction phase. That reconstruction phase is really just kind of this idea of what are we doing new? How can we again move forward with that? So I'm just going to do a quick stop share. Has anybody seen that trauma cycle before? And if so, anybody want to make a comment on that or things that you want to take away from that? Again, one of the biggest things in this trauma is recognizing where are we at on this diagram and where are we at in helping others. So as we kind of move forward, the big thing we want to look at too is this grief cycle. And I know the last time I spoke with the team and the group, we talked about this, that during trauma, we can go through a lot of feelings. We can go through anger, we can go through anxiety, depression, loneliness, panic, guilt. We might start isolating a little bit more because we have this fear of uncertainty as to, am I going to get sick? Is somebody in my family going to get sick? How is this going to impact me? But we want to get to this optimism. And one of the big things in the mental health movement is to let people know it's about optimism. It's about hope that, again, with support, with encouragement, that we can continue to create psychological safety. When we create psychological safety, this is creating trust. You know, again, one of the things that we're looking for and we need to be able to function well as a community and as a workplace is this idea of trust. And with trust, we want to have this belief that it's okay to share concerns. It's okay to speak up about mistakes. It's okay to hold others accountable without fear of punishment or humiliation. It's about being okay talking about the things that are mattering to us. And it's about reducing that mental health stigma. When we create psychological safety, we create this environment that allows people to be vulnerable, but also to have the courage to move forward. And what does that look like and why is that so important? Well, NAMI, of course, does a great job at doing research to find out what's happening with stigma. And one of the big things that we see is because we have such a stigma around mental illness that a lot of times people don't seek out recovery and they go with this delay of this journey. You know, they might say, I've been feeling this way. One of the big questions we like to ask right away is, you know, how long have you been feeling like this? And have you talked to anybody? And again, trying to encourage that they're not alone. most people think they're alone in these feelings, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, they use words like, am I going crazy, or am I nuts? And again, we are all feeling this, and especially during this traumatic situation of COVID. And one of the big pieces of hope that we like to tell people is that most mental health conditions are treatable. And again, can be treatable through psychiatry, can be treatable through counseling, social work. It can also be treatable through self-help situations. And it doesn't have to be long-term. It can be short-term. You know, again, going through that grief cycle, we can go through short-term grief. We may go through longer-term grief, but sometimes, again, getting that information and connecting. One of the big things too is really right now in the United States, you know, mental health problems are the leading cause of disability. So if NAMI and all of us can start to think about how can we start talking about mental health and brain health so we can reduce the stigma, it's going to change, I think, our world. And one of the things that people always want to know is this idea of mental illness can make it challenging, but again, there's many ways that it can be treated. Now, what this slide is right now is just looking, of course, NAMI likes to talk about the ripple effect and how, if I'm living with a mental illness, how that's impacting my family and how that's impacting my community. So again, one of the things that we see is if somebody is living with a mental illness and is not seeking support, they have increased risk for disease. You know, again, cancer, diabetes, they often say heart attacks and issues like that. And again, what I see sometimes is people who have a mental illness might do what's called self-medicating, where it's like, oh my God, I had a really bad day, I better go have some drinks. You know, I had a really bad day, I need to just escape. And sometimes people are like, oh, well, you know, you had that mental illness, so then now you became an addict. Or was it because, you know, they were an addict that became a mental illness? There's this huge blurred line on that. But again, you have co-occurring situations that can happen. And the big thing too is that family, you know, maybe you're feeling okay, but maybe you're trying to support somebody. Right now, there's 8.4 million Americans who are trying to support an adult with an emotional or mental illness. And right now, caregivers, they're saying averaging about 32 hours a week with unpaid care and trying to support that person. So again, if we can start talking about it, reducing the stigma and helping people get help, I think it's going to alleviate some of that pressure onto people. And really, again, you know, this community, we're seeing homelessness rise. We're seeing incarcerated individuals, you know, a lot more issues with getting arrested. You know, again, 70% of youth in the justice system have had at least one mental health condition, you know, and again, just looking at just this impact. So this is why it's so important to really look at what is mental health and what is mental illness. Again, mental health is a state of well-being, and we're all trying to work on our mental health. We're taking walks, we're getting out into nature, we're connecting with people, we are building support systems, we are building community. There's what's called the 40 developmental assets. And those 40 developmental assets, if we have someone we feel connected with at work or at school, we have higher rates of being able to impact our mental health. You know, if we have somebody in our community that is there to support us non-judgmentally, we of course feel opportunities for stronger mental health. We have stress situations that we can work through. You know, think about when you're stressed out. Do you have somebody to call? Do you have somebody who you believe is there to support you? That increases our mental health. We all are trying to work on our mental health. Again, through laughter. We might be, again, utilizing food in a good way. We may be finding things that we love, enjoy, that when we are feeling stressed, we're taking maybe an hour a day to impact our lives. I know this year has been pretty stressful for me. I've had a lot of changes just like you. And one of the things that I do every day is I say, you know what? I need to allow myself an hour a day just to focus on what do I need to do to debrief. Because sometimes we might get compassion fatigue syndrome. If you're going into a human services arena, if you're going into a health arena, if you're going into education, sometimes we can experience compassion fatigue. And that compassion fatigue basically says, I know you're in stress and I want to try to help you in stress, and I'm ultimately taking on your stress. If you're an empath, you might have a tendency to take on the energy of people around you. So it's important to take at least an hour a day. And sometimes people are like, I don't have an hour. There's no way. I'm trying to get everything crammed in. Then try to find some 10 minutes, some 15 minutes. If you can take 15 minutes 4 times a day, there's your hour. That's helping your mental health. Now, when does it become a mental illness? Now, a mental illness is what we call this impact in being able to live, laugh, or love. So this is when you're starting to feel disconnected. This is when you're starting to feel like I have no hope. This is when you start to feel overwhelmed by the distress. And oftentimes we say it is time to check in with someone. If you're, again, unable to connect with things that you used to love to do, all of a sudden you're like, I'm just not so interested in that. It can impact you and it can move into a mental illness. Now, again, mental illnesses can be treated. They're treatable. And a vast majority of people are functioning with a mental illness diagnosis. You know, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to label. Again, that's the stigma behind it. Because again, what you see is you see that we have people who are living every day with a mental illness. They may have been diagnosed with depression. They may have been diagnosed with anxiety. They may have been diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, any of those types of things, borderline dyspersonality. And it's okay because you're still moving forward. But we have the stigma in mind that, oh my gosh, well, you know, if somebody's got a mental illness, they're crazy and they're probably, you know, locked up in a parent's basement, sabotaging. And there's just a weird stigma. So we want to try to reduce that because, again, we want to focus on taking time to be able to help people seek out help before, you know, again, they journey on with it too long. Now, what's it look like? The two I really want to focus on because we're seeing higher rates right now is depression and anxiety. So this is coming out of the mental health first aid information. And again, I'm a certified instructor with this. And this is a 8-hour course I encourage people to take to get certified in mental health first aid. It's kind of like CPR. You know, you're not a counselor, you're not a trainer, but if you see somebody in a time of crisis or you see somebody who maybe is needing some support, it gives you tips and tricks on what to say and what not to say. And I'm going to share some of those things today with us. But depression, what's it look like? It can be weight change, up or down. It can be withdrawal. All of a sudden, people aren't wanting to do things that they used to want to do. They might have self-care issues, starting to change in appearance a little bit. Right now, you might see more irritable types of things because the emotion that comes out during frustration and fear can often be anger. So sometimes people might just lash out. Sadness. One of the big things I see with depression is the inability to make a decision because, oh my gosh, I don't know, is this decision going to be the right decision? What if it's the wrong decision? They may get into some forgetfulness. And one of the big things I start to see with depression is this self-criticism. I can't do it good enough. I'm not as good as Jill. I'm not as good as Joe. I'm comparing myself. And the minute you start to compare yourself, you start to feel more self-critical, especially if you're trying to be perfect. And so that can trigger some depression. One of the things too I like to describe for depression is worrying about things that have happened in the past. And again, what that story is. As you start to look at stress and depression, these are some things that can impact you. Now, today, of course, during Mental Health Awareness Week, today is National Depression Screening Day. So one of the things, of course, that therapists, doctors, and even yourself can do is you can go out and do a depression screening. Now, there are several valid scales out there to help you look at that. One of those scales, of course, is Holmes-Rahe Stress Scale. There's also several depression indexes that you want to seek out with a counselor or a social worker or, again, a doctor. But Holmes is just, again, one of the things that you look at within the last year. The higher your score, the more you may want to look at getting some support. So in the last year, if you've had any of these things happen, what they do is they take that value and they add it all together, multiplying it by the year. So, you know, how long have you been dealing with this? These are some major changes. And right now, many people can say, hey, I've had some major changes. I've had some major changes in personal habits. What I used to love to do, I can't do now because of COVID situations. Or you know what? I've had a major change in health because maybe somebody in your family has had to quarantine, or maybe somebody in your family has been impacted by COVID by death. And so we have to be aware that there's some of these things that are happening. They even put on their vacations. A lot of times people say, well, why should I be depressed about a vacation? Sometimes the anxiety leading up to it can cause some impact. So just again, be aware that today is that National Depression Screening Opportunity. So this is just a quick look on the depression piece of it. I'm going to do a stop share real quick and just do a quick check-in. What do you guys know about depression? And again, is there any stigma that you're seeing out there in regards to depression right now? Any stigma in regards to personal habits or things that you see different? So the chat box is open for you. But again, if there's anything you want to share from your perspective in what you know about depression. Again, there's a lot of stigma out there in regards to this, and it can look differently. Yes, thank you. It can look differently for different people. So sometimes people have the stigma that, oh, well, maybe they're just looking for attention. You see some of that type of stigma that's happening. But again, just being aware, it can look different. And again, it's hard to notice, as many of us are not out and about. It's hard to notice. Sometimes we might be feeling it ourselves. Sometimes people are like, gosh, I can't get out of bed, Lisa. I don't know what it is. I'm just so tired. And am I depressed? I like to say, well, let's just talk about it. Let's see where you're at. And maybe let's do a quick depression screening. Have your changes of eating, your habits changed? Again, just kind of having that talk. But depression can have some major physical symptoms. Yes. Again, just kind of that tiredness, and you can have what's called psychosomatic illnesses. Sometimes people are like, I just don't know why I keep getting all these migraines. And again, there can be some of those physical aspects that are attributed to mental health. When we do psychosomatic types of information, they do say if we want to look at what's happening in our thought patterns. So when we look at, again, kind of this idea of depression, anxiety, we want to see, what are we thinking about? How can we change it? And as we start to look at this idea of, talk therapy, a lot of times people have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy. What therapy is doing is trying to help people reframe and trying to help people see, hey, what is the situation? What is the background of the situation? What is the current assessment? And what are the recommendations? So my nursing family and my nursing friends out there, anybody in that human services, this is called the SBAR approach. What's the situation? What's the background? What's the assessment? What's the recommendation? So again, that's what we're looking at as we kind of move forward with this depression piece. But, again, a lot of times people ask themselves, well, what's going on? What's happening? It can be short-term or it can be long-term. The other big thing then is also anxiety. So NAMI this week has been asking people who are living with a diagnosis to share what they wish people knew about their diagnosis. So I want to share with you Krishna, and she's going to, again, talk about her diagnosis of anxiety. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for us right now.
Hi, my name is Krishna Lewis, and I'm a senior at the University of Miami. I am a youth lead presenter for NAMI on the Ending in Silence program. I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, but today I'll be talking about anxiety. So the one thing I wish that people knew about anxiety is that it's not something that someone can control. For me, it's a constant struggle with my mind every time to trying to control it. And I feel like that's something that affects me every day of my life, especially with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. My anxiety tends to get triggered, but due to my experience. And I feel like with having those thoughts and having those feelings of nervousness and fear, I feel like that's constantly a battle that I continue to struggle with. And when your mind overpowers your body and you have no control over it, it's really hard to be able to be the same person that you were the day before. I'm not trying to be irritating. I'm not trying to be constantly annoyed. I'm not trying to have a panic attack. I feel like sharing my story is the reason why I decided to be a part of NAMI, because I want to end the silence and the stigma on mental health and show that it's not something to be ashamed of. I also feel like that sharing my story will impact someone to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. The only thing is you just have to keep on walking. You can go at your own pace. You don't have to run. But if you take it step by step, you will be able to see that light. And I feel like it's important for people out there to know that just because you're stuck in a dark place, you don't have to be stuck in that dark place forever.
So again, NAMI is doing a great job this week to continue to help people share their stories. And a lot of times people like to be able to have that opportunity to hear from others who may be experiencing things similar to them. And one of the big misconceptions and the big stigmas that I want to encourage you to think about is oftentimes with anxiety, people think, oh, well, they can't do anything, but there's what's called high functioning anxiety. What you may see is somebody who's really detail oriented, maybe really outgoing, really active, super helpful. You see them as hardworking and performing under pressure, and they're really loyal. But what that person with anxiety might be experiencing is this idea of, I've got to make sure I've got everything in order. I've got to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, L, M, N, P. They just try to think of everything. That can be overwhelming and also oftentimes can cause paralysis by analysis. You might see some people pleasing. You might see some inability to slow down, maybe trouble saying no. Or the big thing I see is this idea of, what if I fail? I don't want to even try anything, because what if? The big thing to refocus on anxiety is fill in the what if with a positive versus a negative. A lot of times when I work with students, they're like, what if I flunk this test? I'm never going to be able to pass this class. If I don't pass this class, I'm never going to be able to get a degree. If I don't get this degree, all my friends and family are going to be disappointed. I'm never going to have this. I'm never going to have that. And they go into a huge spiral of negativity. And I want us to move past that, because that's what's called catastrophizing. So we want to move past that fear of failure. So they work so hard to make sure that they don't fail. The other thing too with high functioning anxiety is sometimes they have a hard time saying no. And are you finding yourself saying yes to everything because you don't want to have that failure? You want to make sure that you keep people happy. That becomes a high rate of anxiety. So again, anxiety and depression are two that we really want to focus on, because we see so much of that. And how do we know that somebody's going into some type of distress, that maybe we should say something? If you see a lot of people all of a sudden getting really angry with things and blaming a lot of things, if you're working with kids and you see a lot of outbursts of anger and frustration, that's usually a signal of distress. What's going on? What's happening? They're taking more risks with things. Maybe again, there's more accidents. They may be missing absenteeism, missing work, missing school, maybe having a lot of tardiness because it's hard for them to set up a boundary. There may be some decreased productivity. I'm just not able to be as creative as I could be. You're hearing them say they're tired a lot. That can be a signal of distress. And when you start to hear some of these signals, that's when I think it's really important for us to support them by asking, what's going on? I've noticed this. What can I do to support you? If you see somebody with anxiety, or if you have your own anxiety, these are some things we talk about. We talk about getting grounded. One of the things that I love to do to get grounded is get outside, take your shoes off, put your feet in the grass. Sometimes, again, just being able to get grounded. And there's situations like, if you see somebody or yourself overcome with anxiety, try to think of other things, describe something you're seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, or tasting right now in detail. because a lot of times when you're having that panic attack or that anxiety attack, you want to focus on something to help reduce everything that's going on around you. Again, play a memory game. Try to think of items in a category. I was on a plane once, and one of the ladies sitting next to me had a major panic attack because she didn't like to fly, and we started to have some turbulence. So I did a little bit of distraction therapy, and I said, well, where are you going? What's going to be the place? What are you looking forward to most when you land? And started just have some of those conversations to help them think of categories. What were they excited about when they got there to the place they were going to, that destination? There's things like, reciting poems and visualizing each word. There are some people, when they're feeling an anxiety attack, they have a mantra in their mind. This too shall pass. I am safe and healthy. I'm always protected. Again, reciting that over and over as maybe they're feeling some of that anxiousness. Visualizing. When have you been through this before? Again, people don't know when they may have an anxiety attack. And so it's a matter of, hey, you've survived one of these before. What'd you do? How can we help you? So these are just some things to kind of help reduce some anxiety, and even just in yourself. So where are you at with that? Techniques, I think, are really super important, and just being able to talk about it. Hey, this is something that we can encourage, because when we're trying to create psychological safety, we've got to recognize that there is some fear. And we've got to be able to rewrite the story so we can reconnect with people. When we recognize this fear, we've got to acknowledge it. What are the fears your staff are having? What are the fears your family is having? What are the fears that maybe your colleagues are having, your students? What's going on? And just addressing those. Don't minimize them. One of the things I hear is people are like, oh, that's no big deal. You'll get over it. You don't just get over it. Again, we have to work through it. You went tell somebody, hey, you just had a death in your family. Get over it. You'll be fine. You don't get over it. There's a loss. There's something that's missing. So we've got to be able to address it, recognize it, and then share information. Again, if you're working, there's EAP programs. Those are what's called employee assistance programs. And many companies have those as a benefit for people in their place of employment. So again, encouraging people, especially if you're at work, to think about calling an EAP. And they do everything from counseling to financial support, because right now money issues are an impact for a lot of people. So just calling and just talking to somebody. And again, too, one of the things I encourage, especially if you're leading people, is try to make it easy for people to, if they're exposed, to be able to stay home. Some places have created share leave sick accounts, those types of things, but we've got to recognize the fear first. And I also want us to recognize the trauma. COVID is causing a trauma for us. And many people may, of course, be experiencing some post-traumatic stress. Whenever we're in trauma, one of the big things I ask people to do is kind of rewrite your story. So what has been your greatest loss that you've experienced during COVID? What has been your greatest gain that you've experienced? And just having a dialogue about this helps people, again, realize that, one, they're not alone. And two, that, there has been things that I am going through a grief cycle on. But then what has been your greatest gain? Because if you look back, there may be things that you're seeing that has been a greatest gain for you. Greatest loss for me has been the way I used to do stuff, being able to be face-to-face in front of people. I miss that. I miss teaching face-to-face. And greatest gain is I've been able to reflect on what I'm truly passionate about. I've gotten rid of a lot of distractions so I could focus on what my passion is. That is recognizing the trauma. So what has been your greatest loss or greatest gain? And I'm just going to stop the share right now. If anybody wants to share anything in the chat room, what has been your greatest gain, or what has been your greatest loss during COVID? This is a way for us, again, to be able to focus on growth. So I'll stop for a minute. Greatest gain is time with immediate family. Yeah, it's amazing how everybody's kind of like, you know what? This has been nice to be able to get with my family and we're doing more things outside. We're doing more things, cooking, moving, exercises. That's a greatest gain. I've even had some people say, that's kind of been a loss too, because, oh man, they're driving me crazy. I got to take a break, So I love that. Greatest gain is more time. Gain back to school, more time with kids at home. Yes, getting back into that kind of routine and setting up new routine. Loss, of course, is business. Yes, the business, especially small business, has been impacted quite a bit from this. So one of the big things is to focus on is not getting to see coworkers every day since we work from home, trying to find time to engage virtually. Sometimes it's kind of hard, isn't it? How many of you guys have had a virtual happy hour at your workplace? Some of you are like, what? They do that? Yeah, I love it, Sam. Yeah, you got that virtual happy hour. And were you loving it? It's like, yeah, let's just sit back and check in. Where are people at? Because we're missing kind of that water cooler conversation and kind of those passerby things. So the other thing people are saying is focusing on quality time versus time running around sporting events. I've had a couple of my friends who they had 52 things on a calendar, and they said just being able to say no now because they can now eat at home because they're not running people from practice to practice to game. So having that connected to the family time. Greatest gain's been able to spend more time with your kids, being able to go back to school online, having more resources. I'm going to tell you right now, you can find just about anything out online right now. It's amazing what's available to people and how people have really made that shift, which is kind of nice because then again, we have more accessibility. So just looking at, again, what's been your greatest gain? And one of the things, that's something that you can share and do with somebody if they're feeling overwhelmed, trying to help people put this into perspective. Again, one of the big focuses is then what's your future look like? When you start to talk about your future, this is helping people focus on hope. And this starts to increase resiliency in people. Because if you have something to look forward to, that's one of the big things that can help us kind of get out of sometimes our slumps that we may be in. What have you learned about yourself during COVID? What would your life look like if you applied the learnings as you go forward? I've learned so much more about technology. I used to teach online, but not like with the Zoom and all those different things. So just, again, being able to be more accessible and being able to invite more people into your circle. What is it that you envision for your future? What are you doing to bring hope? And I think when you're working with individuals who are experiencing mental illness or time of crisis, that becomes really important. What is it? What are you looking forward to? Is there something that, that excites you? What do you want your life to look like a year from now? What do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? That's helping create that future. And then just setting a compass of new way of being. We've always talked about this new normal and, oh, we got a new normal and whoo. Well, again, that new normal is saying, what am I going to take with me and what am I going to get rid of? There's been a lot of things that I've gotten rid of that, what, I really don't need that. I thought I did, but after having this type of experience, I'm getting rid of those things. So some of the words that, I've used is trying to be kind and consistent and trying to be focused and fearless. And just sometimes, we got to let go of stuff. The big thing we have to let go of is sometimes what we can control and what we can't control. And with mental illness, one of the things we talk about with our mental well-being is taking control of the stuff that we can control. If we try to take on too much stuff, and if we're taking on other people's stuff, and if we care more than they care, we may be experiencing, again, compassion fatigue. And so I ask people to really be careful with this situation that we're currently in. Right now, people, if they're watching tons of news, reading about it, watching your social media feeds, it can get overwhelming for people and it can cause more compassion fatigue because you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on with our world? Why is there such a huge divide? Is there ever going to be hope? Again, be careful with your news. Try to come to terms with the fact that, what, there's sometimes that we're going to have some pain and suffering. I was on a training call this past weekend. They said, you know what, Lisa, expect every day that there may be 10 things that go wrong. And when you expect that maybe there's going to be 10 things that go wrong during your day, you're much more open to move past them and adapt versus just getting stuck and going, oh my God, this isn't right. And so, focusing on, hey, I expect that maybe things might go wrong. What do I need to adapt quickly? That agility becomes really important for us in our mental health. The big thing we talk about a lot is also helping people see what they're grateful for and trying to find some meaning in the suffering. Right now, ask yourself, what have I learned? Who have I become? What am I going to do different? Some people are blessing this past year going, this was a great time for me to really self-reflect on what's important. That's giving you control. And again, if you've got to blame something, I always encourage people to blame the situation and not the people. Right now we're getting real judgmental with people and, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And, this is the reason why this happened. Blame the situation, not the person. Because when you can show compassion to yourself, you can definitely be soothing and comforting to other people as well. So be aware of that compassion fatigue. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, Lisa, I'm worried about some people. I have some friends that I'm a little concerned about, how do you help? Well, the big thing I encourage you, first of all, is to know your role. Be supportive. Again, if you're seeing people that maybe you're worried about, and because they have expressed to you, they're thinking about hurting themselves, or they're being hurt by somebody else, or they're planning to hurt somebody, that's called mandatory report. And so you want to be able to make sure that you're connecting them with somebody. Person's right to privacy. Sometimes we have to be okay. We don't want to spread, hey, I'm worried about Joe. And you talk about 5, let's go get an intervention team of 5 people. I always say, talk to Joe first. Joe, how are things going? I've noticed this. I've noticed that you've changed. You're not as excited as you used to be. Being able to give that help. Okay. But again, having that right to privacy. The simple things to say, how are things going? You don't seem like yourself. Is there anything I can help with? Oftentimes people think they're hiding it really well. Oh, I'm just going to overcompensate. I'm going to hide. How are things going? I've noticed this. You don't seem like yourself. Is everything okay? The big thing too is listening non-judgmentally. There's a study that was done when kids have a problem. They were asked, who will you tell your problem to? You want to take a guess who they're going to tell their problem to? Sometimes people say, well, their friends, their parents, their teachers. What most kids say is their pet. They're more willing to tell their pet their problem because they're non-judgmental. They're not worried about being told that's not something you should think. They're not worried about being told, that's not that big of a deal. They are not judgmental. And again, one of the big things I always like to say is, what's going on? I've noticed this. Have you ever thought about talking to somebody? Versus, you really need to go get some help. Have you ever thought about talking to somebody? And here's some people to talk to. Right now, prevention suicide hotline, lifeline is really important. Again, 273-TALK, I think is really super important. Hey, and let's call together. I'll sit right here with you. Because a lot of times people just need that person, again, that they feel supported by. Hey, I'll go with you. Let's go talk to somebody. And again, being empathetic. It must be frustrating that this is happening. And then pause. Again, those are some things to really think about. There's a movement right now there where they're talking about with schools to actually on the back of your student IDs, write down all the numbers for help in case you have a lot of stress. And you're going to have stress. You're in school. You've got a lot of pressures. You got family, you might have work, you have school. There may be times that maybe I just need to talk to somebody. And again, there's things like a crisis line where you can just call briefly, the suicide prevention. Big time too is this idea of texting. Some people are like, man, I don't really want to talk to somebody, but I'm really good with texting. Text 741-741. You can text start, you can text go. Again, there's trained crisis counselors and you can talk about anything on your mind. So it's just a great resource that's available. Again, you can get through this. I always like to give people some hope. We can get through this together. And providing some groups, do you know any groups in the area? Or just even what we've been doing as friends is we connect every Friday at 3:00. We just do a quick check-in. How are things going? Where are you at in your business? How can we grow? And just realizing again that you're not alone. So acknowledging that type of thing. Now, the other thing, I always encourage people, do not do some things, okay? So don't make some promises you can't keep. Again, especially if somebody is talking about hurting themselves, I definitely encourage you to get them to somebody. The big thing too, do not give advice. Now people are like, well, what? They're coming to me because they have a problem and I need to fix it. A lot of times people don't want you to fix it. They want you just to support them. So one of the things I use is this idea of, have you ever thought about talking to somebody? Would you like to hear what other people in your situation have done that I know of? But again, do not use names. Have you ever thought trying this? Whenever you start a phrase with, have you ever thought about, versus you need to, you must, you should, you have to, you are seen as much more supportive and non-judgmental. So have you ever thought about? The other big thing too is, do not try to dismiss the problem or the emotions. Get over yourself. Why are you being so dramatic? What's wrong with you? You're always crying. Again, that can come across as judgmental. The other thing too is if we're focusing too much on right or wrong, you really shouldn't feel that way. Look at all the things you got going on in your life. You really shouldn't have these problems. There's people worse off than you. Again, those types of things are not helpful. So focus on trying to, again, be supportive and not necessarily trying to fix the problem. So I'm going to stop for a minute and just take an opportunity for us to look in the chat. And if there's anything, of course, that you guys want to share in regards to advice you would give. And again, sometimes people are like, oh, this is kind of an intimidating way to give advice. But as always, chat in the chat box if you'd like. But always encourage too, self-helps. First of all, thank you for taking time to be here today with this Lunch and Learn. Again, just learning more. The more we can learn, the more we can support. Because one of the things that people tell me, Lisa, I'm scared to talk about mental health because what if they say something I don't know how to respond to? I always like to say, hey, you know what? This is new to me. Let's go talk with somebody. Let's see what we can do. And again, get with some counselors, get with some crisis hotlines. One of the big things too is meditation. There's more and more meditation that's been happening. Every night when I go to bed, I play a 20-minute meditation that helps me look at things that I've been focused on that I enjoy throughout the day. Yoga, of course, massages, depending on your massage therapist. Sensory rooms, there's a lot of people building sensory rooms within their schools. Lights, creating some light therapy for people. Coaching sessions, there's tons of library books. Step outside, take a quick walk. Especially people are telling me, Lisa, I got Zoom fatigue. I don't know what to do with all this. Get some fresh air, stand up, move. If you need to, play some music, get some paddles in your classes. Woohoo! Just even simple things like this can get you re-engaged. And really, again, know that we want to focus on solutions. So being okay with that type of process. There's some resources here that I would encourage you to check into. The big thing is really looking at your own self-care and helping people see self-care, trying to pick a piece out of every one of these pieces of pie. Are we able to take a walk? Can I get some me time? Can I ask for help? It is so hard to ask for help because we have this protective image we're trying to come up with. What I'm learning is that it's okay to ask for help, that people do want to help. Most people will tell me, you know what, Lisa, I wish you would have asked me sooner. I would have helped you. Just being able to ask for help. But again, we have kind of this ego that we create. Well, we have this image we need to do. Look at your emotional, tell yourselves, I am. I have a friend right now who's putting Post-its all over his house, and he's got the words I am, and then he puts grateful, I am gorgeous, I am ecstatic, I'm unstoppable. Just again, getting that energy of you are moving forward. So you pick something out of each of those wheels, and that helps with some life balance. And when you look at also becoming a mental health first aider, again, this is coming through the National Council, and it's an 8-hour certification, face-to-face or done virtually. And what it's teaching you is just some action plans to help people in crisis. And the big thing, of course, is assessing for risk. When do I know if I need to get help? If you're feeling like you have to ask that question, then you probably want to get somebody else connected. Go with that person. Listening non-judgmentally, giving reassurance, giving information, encouraging professional help, and encouraging self-help. Right now with professional help, I know a lot of times people say, it's so hard, Lisa, to get into a counselor. I've had to wait 3 months or 4 months. If somebody needs immediate help, you can go to the emergency room. If somebody needs also immediate help, again, get them connected to that crisis line and get them talking and sharing. And again, there's a lot of organizations that have moved to telehealth. So you can actually talk to somebody virtually. So getting connected that way. The thing too is keep getting yourselves educated, knowing more about mental health, looking at some of the diagnosis. Please don't diagnose your friends and family. I know sometimes people like to try to do that. But just learning and educating. In your psychology classes, I always encourage you to try to take as much away as you can with psychology, because we are all in the people business. And the people business is psychology, understanding how to connect, how to be compassionate, and how do I do it for myself? Be an example for yourself, for others, and have a growth mindset. When we learn something new, let go of being perfect. What can we do to be 1% better? And especially if I'm struggling with anxiety or struggling with depression, what do you want next day? What can we do tomorrow? What can we do to celebrate that small success? When I was working with individuals who wanted to quit smoking, and I worked up at Gunderson Lutheran in their inpatient, one of the things we focused on was, what were you able to achieve within the last hour? Because sometimes people are like, oh, I wasn't able to do this. I wasn't able to quit. Well, guess what? You smoked one last cigarette the last hour than you did yesterday. Measuring things in a smaller scale. Celebrate the small victories. You know what? You got through today at 2 cigarettes less than you were yesterday. 1% better. Good for you. What do you want to try to do tomorrow? And at the end of the day, looking at what have I been able to accomplish versus what I wasn't able to accomplish is going to help with that growth mindset. And again, helping reduce some of that anxiety. And ask yourself too, how can I solve some of these problems? How can I deal with this stress? Make a mental list of resources or things that you want to try to tackle. Right now, people are trying to tackle everything. And I always like to say, pick 1 or 2 things that you want to try to accomplish within the week. And what do you need to say no to be able to accomplish those? Because a lot of times we have a tendency to want to just keep saying yes to things because we don't want to see it and we don't want to focus on it. So try to focus on, what do I want to do to effectively deal with this stress? My tip for you is take a digital detox. I'm doing what's called cell-free Sundays. So I do not get on my phone, on the internet, anything on Sunday. I've told my friends, hey, I'm doing a digital detox and I'm only focusing on nature and family on Sundays. So if you want to do something, we got to coordinate it ahead of time. So again, sometimes just disconnecting from technology is going to help us move through some of those stresses. And helping people see that they have control. You don't have to be a victim of circumstances. Just because you're experiencing anxiety or depression, you still have choices and you have ways to respond or react to situations. And so trying to help people focus on, we do have control, and focusing on the energy. We can influence people. We've got opportunities to do that. We can share our story if we find it helpful. One of the things with self-disclosure I encourage you to do is self-disclose when you feel as though it's going to be helpful to somebody. Because the last thing you want is, how many of you guys have ever had a bad day and you called a friend and then you said to your friend, oh my gosh, I'm having a terrible day. And they're like, oh my God, so am I. And then they go into their terrible day. Again, be supportive. What can I do to listen? And then, hey, you know what? I've kind of had that after they've shared their side of the story. But giving control, having that influence, and looking at, your own mental health, prioritizing to-do lists. Have an A, B, and a C. Today, here's my A's, these are my B's. Set realistic expectations. What's happening with the stress and the trauma is a lot of times people are expecting more and more and more. And then people are getting burned out and they're like, oh my gosh, I cannot take on one more thing. So if you're feeling that way, feeling overwhelmed, I always encourage people to talk to whoever they're working with, whoever's supporting them. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of work you have to do, especially now that you've moved to online, try to chunk it. Today, I'm going to work on this for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half an hour. Try to find and prioritize those smaller chunks. Because again, if you're looking too big at the big picture, you don't want to start. And that becomes overwhelming, stressful, can cause a lot of anxiety. So chunk it. If you're at work and you just keep getting things piled on you, and you're feeling overwhelmed, take a minute, write down all your things and just talk to your supervisor. Hey, can you help me prioritize these right now? These are all the things I have going on. So again, that's going to help you avoid some procrastination. And as always, do your techniques like trying to get as much sleep as you can, reach out to somebody, try to move distractions. They tell you not to have a TV or your phone in your bedroom because that can be tough. How many of you want to jump up in the middle of the night and just jump on this if you have some insomnia? So again, not to have technology, that helps with those things. Promoting mental health in the workplace, again, start talking about it, just like we're doing today. Hey, I'm feeling this. Or is anybody else feeling this? What can we do? Because again, it's treatable. So I encourage you to go out to NAMI. NAMI has so many great blogs out there. They've got a lot of movements now to try to help reduce the stigma. It's a great tool, a great resource. I would encourage you to check it out. There's another one too. Actually, when I was teaching, I took students on field trip up to Hazelden. It's in Minnesota. Hazelden and Betty Ford has now combined forces, but you can check out their website. They have tons of blogs. They have strategies. They have, treating what to do when worries take over. I've shared several of those already. But again, just looking at different things. So I would encourage you to check out hazeldenbettyford.org for more information on those types of things. And just start the conversation. Right now, if you're in the business arena, the Society of Human Resources Management has an entire focus on mental illness in the workplace. So this is Blake Mikowski. He actually suffers from depression. He was, of course, the creator of TOMS and really sparked a whole movement of get one, give one. But he's starting to share his story of depression and what he had to do. Because again, the stigma is, if you're depressed or you're anxious, you're just sitting at home doing nothing. There are high functioning individuals with mental illness that are great successors. You look at Robin Williams, fabulous in his trade and his craft, high amounts of depression. Just again, starting this conversation so that we can reduce the stigma. So I'd encourage you to visit that site. Also, a lot of times people are like, I've got guys in my life that, they don't talk about feelings and, ooh, that's too touchy-feely. There was a project done in Colorado because there was high rates of suicide among men in Colorado. So they decided to create this man therapy. So it's an excellent website that has used humor to actually draw out opportunities. So again, that piece, I'm going to share this with you real quick. It's quite entertaining.
Did you know that men have feelings too? No, not just the hippies. All of us. Hello, I'm Dr. Rich Mahogany. Welcome to Man Therapy.
Man Therapy is the story of a campaign that started in Colorado, but went on to spark discussion across the U.S. and around the globe. We were hired to help reduce the suicide rate for working-aged men in Colorado. First, we had to address the cause of suicide: mental health issues, anxiety, anger, depression, substance abuse. Our mission was clear: preempt suicide by helping men before they are in crisis. So we used humor.
Yoga isn't just for yuppies anymore.
And a manly man's approach to get men paying attention. Man Therapy is hosted by Dr. Rich Mahogany, a fictional health professional who's part doctor, part football coach, and part drinking buddy.
Men have a way of doing things. A man has his way of eating, of exercising, and of straightening up.
And at mantherapy.com, we set out to make the world's first comprehensive mental health website for men, where our fake doctor encourages patients to take his patented 5-minute survey, the 18-point head inspection. Man Therapy takes the stigma head-on, educates about mental health, provides assessments, and gives men the tools and resources to fix themselves. Before we knew it, mantherapy.com started receiving visits from around the world. We took advantage of the momentum and sent out man therapy kits to media and therapy pros. They praised our novel approach and helped us spread the word even further. Health departments from other states started inquiring about adopting the campaign, and then we got another call from down under.
I'm Dr. Brian Ironwood.
Beyond Blue, a health promotion charity, wanted to bring man therapy to the millions of Aussie men battling the same mental health stigma we see here in the U.S.
So I'm going to stop that. But again, it's just a kind of a lighthearted
And
way.
so was born Dr.
to
Mahogany's
encourage
brother.
People. I work a lot with manufacturing companies and trying to help reduce mental health stigma. And that's one of the things that people are like, oh, that's pretty wild. I didn't see that. I didn't know that. But again, being aware
From uterus
of
down
that
under.
process, I think is super important for
No, not just the hippies.
So again, when you look at other organizations, we have one in the tri-states and it's called Brain Health Now. And they're trying to just change the wording from mental health to brain health. And they have a lot of initiatives in the Dubuque and Grant County areas here. So again, that's something of interest. That's a definite resource for you. The big thing too is just, again, I always tell people to try to move through the storm.